Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. My name is Patrick Halstead, and I'm the Chief Project Manager here at Qdabra. And it's my pleasure this morning to showcase a solution from one of you and to introduce our guest speaker. Shane Harvey has been one of our listeners, I think, for over a year. He is a Director of Outsourcing Services at Key Management Group in Southfield, Michigan. And I first heard of Shane's technique a couple months ago. I was so impressed with its simplicity and the value that he had that I took a note. We have to present this to everyone and tell everyone about it. Now, as many of you know, this webinar has been in the schedule for several weeks now. I want to say about 6 weeks maybe. And it kept getting bumped because we, as in I, didn't have time to adequately prepare it. So finally I just asked Shane to do it, and Shane, I'd like to welcome you aboard and thank you very much for agreeing at a very short notice to do this today. Shane?
I'm here.
Great. Well, before we switch over and do the demo, I just want to quickly do a quick two quick questions for everyone. We've got 2 polls this morning, and we're just going to run them real quick here. First question is, what version of SharePoint are you using? And this just gives us an idea of where people are at. This webinar, I believe, works with 2010, 2013. We know it works with 365. Shane, you want to comment? Looks like, is it true that 2007 was not tested, right?
That's correct.
We don't have anybody that's still using 2007, and that is great news. We do have, it looks like 52% of you are using 2010 still. 2013, 20%, about 8% of people are using 365, and 20% are using multiple. So great, thank you so much for that. I'm going to do one more quick poll here, and that question, the next question is, do you need to send information to users who may not have InfoPath? And this is one of the big values of this technique today, and it surprisingly comes up a lot. It's a very, very common request. And I'm just shocked, Shane, that we took us so long to do this webinar. But 81% of you say yes. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this quick poll. So next, I want to just do one quick slide and just talk with Shane here about why this technique is useful. Now, obviously, number one, the downstream users, but number two, because Word is just so much better at printing documents and laying them out. So we're going to show you this technique, and I'm going to switch the presenter to Shane, who's going to do a quick demo, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how he did it. So we're just going to do the demo showing you exactly how it works, and then we'll actually show you how. We'll show you what it does, and then we'll show you how. So Shane, I'm going to make you presenter.
All right, so hopefully everybody can see my form. So our company and what we do is we work with financial advisors, and they need to document all of their dealings with their clients. And one of the things that our clients had asked for was a one-stop shop to do that. And so we created this form, and once the form was created, we built in, originally we built right into InfoPath a print view where the client, or where our client, the advisor, could document, send out a letter to the client. And what we found was that the advisors wanted more than just the stock form that we had created. They wanted to be able to adjust some wording or change the way that it looked, or for their older clients they wanted to increase the font size. And so we wanted to go to use something a little bit more flexible like Microsoft Word. So I did a little bit of research and came up with this technique. And what you see in front of you is our form that our clients use. And to save a little bit of time, I pre-filled a lot of this data, but I did want to show you that it is an actual form that we're running here. And so our clients, the advisor, can fill out all the information in here, like when they met with their client, when they want to date the letter, and just simply document the things that they talk about. And when they're done with that, then they can just hit this Create Summary Letter button. And what it does is it sends off information to a SharePoint list, and that SharePoint list will then create a letter from that. It takes a couple of minutes to do it, but what we've got is another library on our site, which is a summary letter library. You can see that I tested this a little while ago. If we do a refresh, like I said, it might take a second or two because it runs through a workflow. So here's the list behind the scenes. It says that and there's the letter right there. And when you click on the letter, you can view it in Word Online, and you see that the date that we put in there and the client and the city name and all that stuff is in there. The notes that I typed in about what I wanted my client to do, I forgot to put their title, so you can see there's a placeholder in there. So now our clients could then just turn around and print this and print it to PDF or print it to their local printer on letterhead and send it off to their client. But then they could also go in and they could edit it in the client, Microsoft Word client. And it takes a second to load up here, but you'll see in just a moment. There's the letter where you can then type right in here and make your updates to the letter if you needed to, changing font and things like that. The nice thing about this is if you make the updates in here, you can then save this document, and it saves it right back into that library because you're opening it right from the library. So,
Great. So let's switch back real quick here. That's great, Shane. That's a quick show and tell. We're going to walk through how we did it, how Shane did it here in a second. We have one question from Naden. Thank you, Naden. We'll answer this in just one moment. That's a great question, by the way. And his question is whether this will work with rich text and images. And I think we actually talk about that in a slide. So once again, what Shane just showed you was, and hopefully you can see my screen again, Shane, but he just opened it in 365, an InfoPath form, filled it out, and submitted it to a library. Now, in addition to submitting to the library, he has a technique using one of our qRules plugins to map some data to a list. That's not required for this to work, but he's mapping it to a list, and there's a workflow on that list. You could have the workflow in the library, and then that triggers this. We'll show the workflow in a second. That triggers the copying of the data from that list into the Word form using these document properties, using the document information panel. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then he just goes in, opens the form in Word, and it just works in the browser. And that's really cool. So I want to quickly go through, and I've got some screenshots in the deck for you to reference. You'll get the presentation as part of the webinar this morning. I guess we should talk, Shane, about these techniques. So we're extracting data from an InfoPath form. We're creating a template with fillable fields, and we should really talk about how we did that. So I'm going to switch back to you, and maybe what we can do is show them, first of all, let's go to the designer form if you have that open, and show them the form of the designer. And I kind of want to go to the promoted properties first. I know you're not using those, but I do want to show people where to go if they don't have a list in between and they're just using their library. So I'm going to switch back to make you presenter.
All right, give me a second because I got to pull up that form.
And while Shane is opening the form, and sorry I put you on the spot there, Shane, so the first technique is to make sure that the data from InfoPath is mapped either to a column in your library or to a list column. And we have this tool called qRules, which some of you may be using, that allows you to map data, and more importantly, repeating data to a separate list in SharePoint, which you can then have a workflow on. Well, you could also have the workflow on the library itself. And to actually get those fields to show up in the library, it's very easy to promote those properties. And I think probably everyone knows how to do property promotion. You go into File, there's a Form Options, Form Properties, and then there's Form Options. And I could show this too. Let's see, Shane, are you sharing yet? Let's see.
I thought I was.
Oh yeah, you are. You're sorry. I have a mistake. So go to File, and then let's just show them where to go. If Advanced Form Options at the bottom, and then Property Promotion. And this is where you're going to want to promote stuff if you're not using Shane's technique. So Shane doesn't have anything here, but you'll want to add those fields that you want to include in your Word document. This is where you do it. So you just add all those fields. If you have a repeating structure, you can't add all the repeating items, so you have to go and use a technique like Shane's doing, which is to map it to a list. And there is another technique using CAML, C-A-M-L, to do it, and we've talked about this in many webinars, so just keep that in mind. And so let's switch now to the to show them the Word document, if you don't mind. So the first technique, getting the data out of InfoPath, and then on the back end, we have to get the data into Word, right? We're going to show you in the middle in a second. But let's go to that. See, you can see the document information panel here on the top of the form. And in the ribbon, the way you get here, let's see, where is that document information panel thing in the ribbon just for folks? It's underneath Developer. So you have to click on Document Panel, and then that gives you this panel of fields at the top. And those fields are exactly the items in the I want to say here, there's those document properties are in the form. And I believe, Shane, that when you created this document template, they showed up because it was associated with the list, right, with the library.
Yeah, so what I had to do with to get this to happen was I created the behind-the-scenes SharePoint list, or you could use promoted properties, and used columns in that list that matched these items. So I have a column in the list, and I can actually pull that up. So I have columns in the list that associate to all of those fields, the letter, date, and the client name, and all of those. So what happens is when you put in, when you put the information in and it carries over into this list, then what it does is it matches the items in the list to the library settings that I have as well. So we've got the document library. And with this library, you'll see there's the columns as well. And that's where I could then take the template for this library, which is the document that you see, and that's where these items popped up. So it was because I created this letter as a template on the library, with the columns already in place, I could then pull those items in.
That's great. Now let's switch to the third thing, the thing in the middle, which is the workflow, and show them how simple that is.
Okay. So I used SharePoint Designer to create a workflow on that original list. So where I took the information from the InfoPath form and dropped it into the columns in the list, when that happens, it then triggers a workflow. And the workflow it's really just a one-step workflow that creates an item in summary letters, which is that library. So when you drop an item into the list, it then takes that information and carries it right over into the summary letters, and it's using that library, that template, the Word template that I created with those filler items in there to drop in from the list column to the associated column in the library.
So it's really that simple. You're just copying the items from that list or that library into Word using this technique here, and that is. I used to think that word automation was required to do this, and word automation, some of you may know, is a feature in SharePoint, which I don't think is available in 365, or at least it's not fully available. But what Shane's showing here is that it's really a lot simpler than that. You're just copying the values using this workflow step, and it doesn't require any word automation services. It's just very simple using that document information panel and these columns and mapping them across. So really a three-step thing. Let's go back to the slide deck just quickly here. I'm just going to switch out. We have a couple questions. We're going to get to those in a second. So those are the three techniques. You obviously got to get the data out from your InfoPath form. You got to get data into Word, and you have to map it between them using those, using that workflow. So very simple to do, We just showed you how. There is a blog link in the article, in the webinar deck that you get, and you can refer to this. Just a word of caution. It is 2009, and there are a few gotchas in it. In fact, we've listed out the gotchas here, and Shane, I'll let you walk through these because you're the one that figured this out.
Yeah, so the first thing that I found is at the top of the blog post, it talks about using a word template, the DOTX extension, and that I tried that a couple of times, and for some reason it never would pull through. So I read further down, and I actually ended up reading another blog post, and both of them referred to the DOCX extension, and that's the extension that you have to use. Now, what was really helpful for me was I created the document way in advance. I didn't pull in any of the fields. The document was actually the first thing that I created, the template that I wanted to use. I just didn't plug in any of the placeholders from the document information panel. And I saved it locally, which was really helpful because I had to post it back a couple of different times. I know one of the questions was about rich text, and what I found was I wanted most of these to be rich text where we could carry bullet points and different things like that through. And using the technique that I used with qRules, it took the information from InfoPath and put it into the SharePoint list just fine. But for some reason, when it went from list to library using that workflow, it lost the rich text format to it and didn't flow through correctly. So I ended up setting it up all as regular text, and then figured if our clients wanted to bullet point and stuff like that down the road, they could do it in the client of Word along the way. Now, I also, when I created this, I used and just demonstrated SharePoint 2013, and in 2013 you can create workflows that are either 2010 workflows or 2013 workflows, and I originally set them up as 2013 and found out that there's some type of bug in SharePoint 2013 that won't allow you, in the designer, that won't allow this technique to work with a 2013 workflow, so you have to use a 2010 workflow. Also, once I got everything put together and got all the forms set up and everything, the first time that I ran it, it didn't carry the stuff through. But if I went in and republished that template again, it was already all set up. I just needed to then go in and post it again. It worked fine after that. And then the one last thing, the bottom bullet point is, I learned by trial and error that you need to have the workflow set a unique document every time that you post it in, every time that you create a Word document. There's an option in the workflow to overwrite the existing file, but when that happened, it wasn't carrying the document, it wasn't carrying the information through to the document the same way. So again, we'd end up with the same document looked right, and then when you went in and looked at it, it didn't carry any of the information through. But if we switched it to add the unique identifier at the end, it worked every time.
And that's, I think that this screenshot here shows this file name conflicts. In this dialog, when you're creating that mapping, you want to make sure you choose that first option. Which you're saying that the second option doesn't work. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. So this is really wonderful, and I want to thank you again for the wonderful technique. This is awesome because it's so simple, and you really came up with a novel solution, and really it's been awesome having you on the webinar this morning. We've got a lot of questions. We're going to go through those in a second. I just want to mention one more thing before we hit the questions. When you're creating links in InfoPath, you could actually create a link in the Word. Obviously, you'll have a link to the Word document when you're done, but you could pre-create that, I think, in InfoPath. Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we create a link in InfoPath using the ID, we could stuff that link in the InfoPath form, save it, and then when they open the form again, they'd have a link to open the document. Do you think that would work?
I do think that would work.
Great. So that just sometimes people want to be able to reference it and have a cross-reference, and a lot of times you may be wondering, well, how do I create the link in advance if I don't know what the ID is? And the solution is to use one of these unique ID techniques. We've talked about this in previous webinars. You can search our channel on YouTube and find them. But there are really three techniques. You can use, of course, the ID in SharePoint. That's the number here. Or you could use a natural key, like a username and a date time string. Or you could use a globally unique ID, and qRules has a command that allows you to generate that. For those of you who are wondering what qRules is, it's just a plugin that we offer as part of our products here at Qdabra. And there's a free download. We have 7.1 coming up any moment now. I keep telling you it's out there. Well, it is finally going to hit the street this week, and we're going to publish it to our website. But you can get a free trial download of qRules. You don't need qRules for this solution, but it will simplify a few things. And then you just store the ID in your form, and you create the link in the form. Make sure it works, obviously, and then there should have correspondence, even though you haven't essentially created the Word doc until you've submitted it. Because you know what the link's going to be, you should be able to create that link and put it in your form. Okay, so that's the bonus. I'm going to switch to questions now, and we have a lot of questions. Let's see, Shane, I'll let you answer the first one from Naden, which is, will this technique support tables and pictures as part of rich text controls, part of the InfoPath form? And I've responded saying, this is the hardest question. Right up front, Naden asked us the hard one. No out of box. I'm thinking that there might be a way to do it with some logic or some code. What do you think?
I would think so. I honestly didn't need to try that, so I didn't go that far into it. But I do know that repeating data shouldn't be an issue, because I actually set this up originally using just a repeating field, and it didn't lay out right in the form the way that I wanted it to, but it did work carrying the data through. I don't know about pictures or tables.
And for the repeating data, you would need that list technique. Instead of promoting the properties to a library, you'd need to use that submit the SharePoint list command in qRules to map the repeaters to the list, actually, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so then next question from Brian. Great question, Brian. Does mapping the data with qRules get around multiple lines of text columns being promoted as a single line of text? Yes, it does, and that's probably the #1 feature in qRules. Question from Kenneth. Can the word template with columns work in 2010? Shane?
Yes.
Yes, great question.
I actually set this technique up in 2010, and now I've upgraded to 2013, and it still works.
And 365. You're on 365. And then Nathan has another question here. Will support for pictures, if part of the picture control or attachment in the InfoPath library document, will this support, I guess I'm trying to read this correctly here, attachment is a control inside the InfoPath form. So when you have a picture control or attachment inside the form, can you map that to Word? I don't think we've tried that, have we?
I have not, no. Okay,
so that's a great question, Aidan. Sorry I don't have an answer right now. We'd be more than happy to look into it if you send email to us. And then a question from Stephen here. Oh, not a question, but users might like to know that I have used these techniques for getting data into Excel or creating new Excel workbooks. Great comment, Stephen. And Stephen, if you want to do a shout out here, I think I could probably unmute you here, and let's see if I can do that. And you can do it. I don't know if you have audio, Stephen, but this weekly webinar is all about the community, and we're trying to help people find solutions. And Stephen, I'm just going to unmute you here. I think I can do this. Maybe not. Maybe I need to make you a panelist here. I'll make you a panelist. How's that sound? And an organizer if need be. Here, let's see if I can switch you over. So I'm having trouble with the silly GoToMeeting. But Stephen has this great comment, and Stephen, I want to thank you. He's used it with Excel, and if I could figure out GoToMeeting's controls, I'd have you say a word. But thank you very much for that comment. Steve Stern has a question in the document information panel. Okay, so Steve, we've made you a panelist finally. I just forgot to see the pop-up on my screen. Silly me. But you are there now, Steve. So if you want to unmute yourself, you can say a word. Steve Stern has a question here on the DIP, the document information panel. there was a location field. Does that point to the SharePoint form library? That's a great question. Shane?
No, it doesn't. It actually points to where the location of the Word template is.
And that's really important. So I'm really glad you asked that question.
So if you actually switch, Patrick, if you switch over to my screen, I've got it highlighted so that you can see the whole layout of that location.
Coming at you here.
So I'll hover over it because it's just kind of a long one here, but basically you'll see where it says summary letter template docx on the end there. That's the template that I used, the Word document template that I used, which is what you see here. So that's the location that it's looking at.
That's great. And Naden has another point on Stephen's point earlier about you can use the same technique for Excel. Well, Naden's pointing out very correctly that you can use the same technique to map data to a separate InfoPath form. So yeah, great comment, Naden. I'm surprised we haven't figured this out. You know, we're supposed to be MVPs here. So much for MVP-dom. But yeah, it's great that the community has come up with this wonderful solution. And I want to agree with Brian here at the end that you know, Shane has done a great job of this, and I want to thank Shane again for doing this today. We have a couple more webinars coming up, and I just we're trying to basically book this out for the next I want to say month or two, so that we don't keep changing on us at the last minute. But we do have two scheduled for next week and the following week. Next week, Bree Houston and Mel Balsamo, two of our expert form developers, are going to show you this second part of the performance webinar that we meant to do in February. So I apologize for the delay, but we are going to do this. We've done this a couple times in the past, so we do have webinars already on this on YouTube. And then the following week, Hillary Stupa is going to show you another technique that actually, Shane, you're using, which is the ability to dynamically detect where the form is loaded from and where the data connections are, and allow you to publish one form to many subsites. You're using content types, of course, to do that, but there's a couple other cool techniques for dynamically reconnecting the data connections and changing the submit URL. And then we have a whole bunch of webinars coming up in April, and we're going to be a little bit more organized about doing it. I want to thank everyone for being here today. We have taped this. We will get this up to YouTube later today. But most of all, I want to thank Shane. Shane, awesome job. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon, everyone. Have a great day.